Now we are looking at Chapter 9 of the Module 5. Now, Chapter 9 sets out some of the guidelines in relation to the Financial Advisors Act. Let's look at the first one that's set out on this particular text. Right, if you look at the paragraph 1, it repeats the point that guidelines are intended to provide general guidance and are meant to be for best practices, which would apply generally across the financial advisory industry. Since guidelines set out general guidance for best practices, they do not create any legally enforceable obligations or duties, unlike written directions, such as directives and notices. As I had pointed out earlier, violation or infringement, or to be more exact and precise, if a financial advisor or a financial advisor representative, if these they do not follow the guidelines, then some consequences may follow. Right? So therefore, it is prudent for a financial advisor or a financial advisor representatives to follow the guidelines given under the Financial Advisors Act. Now quickly, we look at paragraph 2. Now these are the guidelines on the criteria for grant of a financial advisor's license. Alright, as we have discussed earlier, I believe in chapter 2, regarding the notice under FAA notice on the regarding the grant of a financial advisor's license. Now here, under this particular guideline, so they are giving you more details in regard to how a financial a corporation can apply for a grant of a financial license. Now for this guideline, I just want to move on quickly because we have dealt with this in the earlier notice provision relating to the grant of a financial advisor's license. Now very quickly, we look at paragraph 5. Right, paragraph 5. Here it says who needs to apply for a financial advisor's license. Right. Here very quickly it says that corporations which carry on a business of providing any financial advisory service are required to hold a financial advisor's license under the FAA unless exempt under section 23. Alright. Individuals who are employed by or acting for a corporation which is licensed or exempt under sections 23 1A to E of the Act to provide any financial advisory services are required to be appointed or provisional representative under the Act. So if you are individual persons, natural persons, you can be appointed as an appointed financial advisor representative or a provisional financial advisor representative. All right, I hope you understand the two which we have discussed earlier. All right, a provisional financial advisor representative is somebody who is in the process of relocating to Singapore. All right, who has met who has necessary experience or met the entry requirements, and they are giving these provisional representatives are given 3 months to pass the relevant examinations before they can be appointed as an appointed representatives. Right, so there are two types of representatives which we have discussed earlier. Now, insofar as the license is concerned, only corporations are allowed to apply for financial advisors licenses in that regard. Now, very quickly, if you look at paragraph 7, it repeats that point that a financial advisor license will only be granted to a corporation. All right. And then it says a bit further there, you're required to establish a physical presence in Singapore. All right. So there is a requirement for the financial advisor corporation to have a physical presence in Singapore. And in assessing an application, the authority takes into consideration the following factors. Right. Now this is more in more details or in greater details than what we have discussed earlier. So here it says whether the applicant employs or appoints at least 2 full-time individuals as appointed representatives for the provision of financial advisory services which a corporation is seeking to be licensed to provide. All right, that's amended November 2010. All right, and then there's also some guidelines there for the appointment of a CEO, a Chief Executive Officer, and all executive directors, right? EDs, as they call executive directors, EDs, having a minimum of 5 years of relevant working experience in respect of the financial advisory services that corporation is seeking to be licensed. All right. So here the details are being set out in the guideline. Right. So the CEO and EDs must have a minimum of 5 years relevant working experience, meaning doing similar work that the corporation is making a license application, and at least 3 years in a managerial capacity. So there are 2 sub-requirements there, as it were. 5 years relevant working experience minimum, and a minimum of 3 years in a managerial capacity. In that case, I may say that this managerial capacity should be at the director's level. All right, so that these senior people, the CEO and the directors, have the relevant managerial and professional experience to be able to manage the corporation. And also whether such persons have the acceptable academic qualifications or professional qualifications. All right. So the applicant is a corporation, right? But the people running the corporation must have the necessary experience as defined in paragraph 7(2). Right? Then the third point there, whether the applicant's board of directors comprises a minimum of 2 members, with at least one of whom is a resident in Singapore. Right? So there must be a physical presence. There must be at least one person, one director, one member who is resident in Singapore. All right? And then 4, whether the CEO of the applicant is resident in Singapore, and whether the CEO or the EDs are placed in a position of conflict of interest. All right? So that are the requirements, or those are the requirements in relation to the appointment of the executive officers, including the chief executive officer, right, and the directors. And 8 gives you more details, right? Give you more details in relation to the minimum financial requirements that we were talking about earlier, all right, in chapter 2, I believe. Yeah. So here it spells out again, paid up capital $150,000, all right, and then the $150,000 is in provision of the services listed under A sub-paragraph 1. All right. So you look at the A, B, and C, futures contracts, spot and foreign exchange contracts, or over-the-counter derivatives contracts, the value of which is determined by reference to, is derived from, or varies by reference to the value of the value or the amount of one of the more currencies, right? Or fluctuating the values or amount of one or more currencies or currency indices, right? So if you are to provide advice, then the paid up capital is $150,000. All right, and then 2, advising others in the manner specified in paragraph 6b, right? Similar. Paragraph sub has been deleted, and then paragraph 4, arranging contracts of insurance in respect of life insurance other than contracts of reinsurance. All right. So if the applicant is to advise on the products as stated under 8.1a subsection 1, subsection 2, and subsection 4, then the paid up capital is $150,000, right? Now look at B, paid up capital $300,000, and then you can see again the types of financial advisory services that are to be provided for the paid up capital to be $300,000. Right? And paragraph C there says that the paid up capital is also $300,000 in the case of an applicant which carries on a business of providing a combination of the financial advisory services rendered to in subparagraphs A and B above. All right. So that sets out the paid-up capital of the applicant in relation to the application for a financial advisor's license. Now, 8.2, very quickly, we look at professional indemnity insurance, which we have discussed earlier in the notice provision. And again here, I must say that it gives you more details in the guideline. And you can read very carefully there. 8.2, an applicant must have enforce a stand-alone non-hybrid professional indemnity insurance policy. All right. Here you can see for yourself that the guideline is important, all right, because it adds content, it adds substance, all right, to the notice which we have discussed earlier, right? Now here we say a stand-alone underlying non-hybrid professional indemnity insurance, under which the limit of indemnity covered should be an amount of not less than $500,000, and under which the deductible allowed must not be more than 20% of the applicant's net asset value, all right, at the end of its immediately preceding financial year. Now, this requirement is stipulated in Regulation 1717 of the Financial Advisors Regulations. All right, so those are the numbers that the applicant must take note of, right? So the applicant must have, right? It must have enforce a standalone non-hybrid professional indemnity insurance policy, right? And the sum is not less than $500,000, okay? Under which the deductible allowed must not be more than 20%. Right? So those are the stipulations that must be complied with, all right? Although it's in a guideline, but it must be complied with if the corporation wishes to make an application or to apply for a financial advisor's license. Now, MAS may also consider the following alternative forms of professional indemnity insurance, as long as the applicant has access that such a professional indemnity does not undermine the interests of investors, subject to the fulfillment of conditions specified for each type of professional indemnity insurance. All right, so it sets out in this guideline here, in the box as you can see, type of PII, meaning professional indemnity insurance, and conditions to be satisfied in the second box. If you look at the group professional indemnity insurance, it says there very clearly two conditions. One, minimum coverage has to be at least 5 times the required quantum under a standalone non-hybrid PII. Right? Now, if the deductible of the group PII is greater than 20% of the applicant's net asset value or net head office funds at the end of its immediately preceding financial year, then an undertaking from the applicant's parent company to cover the excess in the event of a claim will be required. Right? So if that be the case, then the parent company must give an undertaking, right, to cover any excess in the event of a claim should come about. So that's in terms of a group professional indemnity insurance. All right. Now, in terms of the hybrid type, all right, a hybrid type, then the sub-limits have to be set for the non-PII sections of the hybrid PII. Right? And then total coverage under this particular type, the coverage less the sub-limits of the non-PII sections has to be at least equivalent, you note the bold letter, at least equivalent to the required quantum under a standalone non-hybrid professional indemnity insurance. All right, so it's very clearly stated there. And then third, the group hybrid professional indemnity insurance. Right? And I just want to draw your attention to the 3 bullet points there, and particularly to the second bullet point, right? Where it states that the total coverage of the group hybrid PII less the subunits for the non-PII sections has to be at least 5 times, in bold, at least 5 times the required quantum under a standalone non-hybrid PII. Right? And similarly, if the deductible of the group hybrid PII is greater than 20% of the applicant's net asset value or net head office funds at the end of its immediately preceding financial year, then an undertaking from the applicant's parent company is required, right, to cover any excess in the event of a claim, right? So that this excess provision cover, right? An undertaking must be given by the head office, right? By the parent company, the applicant's parent company. Okay, so here you can see very clearly that it sets out the actual types of professional indemnity insurance, right, that is required if a corporation were to apply for a financial advisor's license. Right, as I've said earlier before, from day one when I started this program, all right, you need to be concerned with the guidelines. Right, I just repeat the point that the Act is difficult to read. Right, the notice is a bit easier, and of course the guidelines give you more details. Right. So for people on the ground, like yourself, a financial advisor representatives attending this course, there's a need to know the details, right? So the details are set out in the guidelines. Okay. Now 8.3 talks about the track record. We have done that, minimum 3-year proven track record. And then 8.4 is something new. In respect of this guideline. Now, in case of an applicant which does not satisfy the 3-year track record requirement, right? You have a company that's less than 3 years, right? The CEO should own not less than 20% shareholding of the applicant. Right? So you do not satisfy, if the applicant does not satisfy or the applicants do not satisfy the 3-year record requirement stipulated in 8.3. Alright, that's above there. 8.3 talks about minimum 3-year proven track record in the financial advisory business. So if an applicant does not has the 3-year track record, then the CEO should own not less than 20% shareholding of the applicant. Right? That means the CEO must have more. Alright, this is to put the money where the mouth is, so to speak, right? And the CEO and the ED should, in the aggregate, own not less than 50% shareholding of the applicant. Right? So again, your money must be in the company, right? Before you can get a license. So one of the conditions is the track record. If you do not fulfill the track record requirement, then you need to have more shareholdings. Right? The CEO should own not less than 20% of the applicant, and the EDs and the CEO in combined in the aggregate own not less than 50% shareholding of the applicant. Okay, so those are the details. And of course, if you look at 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, right, that gives you more detail. Right, 8.5 says that if the applicant is a foreign company, it should be subject to proper supervision by a recognized home regulatory authorities and possesses the requisite track record. Right? So therefore, if a foreign company come from a clear jurisdiction governed by the laws acceptable to Singapore, then I think it's easier. All right? If the applicant is a foreign country from some tax haven countries, then there may be some difficulties in getting approval. So again, it relates to the question of fit and proper, which I have discussed with you earlier. Right, 8.6 talk about having the proper systems and processes and procedures, all right, in terms of compliance, in terms of professional standards, in terms of good practices. All right. So this financial advisor applicant, all right, must have access to research reports, financial planning tools, services, investment capability, and the whole works, right? Right? For example, you must have the proper system to safeguard or to prevent money laundering and terrorism financing, as we have discussed. All right, or the proper systems and processes to deal with downtime, cyber hygiene, and fraud reporting, and so on. Right? So therefore, it requires this applicant to be able to demonstrate they have these internal systems, controls, processes, procedures in place, right? And of course, it has to be commensurate with the size and the complexity of the business, right? To ensure compliance with the law, to be able to follow good practices, best practices, and so on. And 8.7, well, it's the same thing there, fit and proper. All right, make sure the applicant itself, the officers, the employees, the representatives, and the substantial shareholders, all these people must satisfy, these persons must satisfy the fit and proper criteria, right? So this is one of the key things that goes across the financial advisory services business, right? All right, 8.8 talks about letter of responsibility. All right, if the applicant is from a foreign jurisdiction. I'll read to you this. Where appropriate, the authority may require applicant to procure a letter of responsibility from its parent company or a related entity within a group. Now you'll notice that this is amended 2020, all right? Amended 28 January 2020. All right, that means amended only a few months ago, all right? So if the applicant is a foreign company, all right, and the applicant is in Singapore or to operate in Singapore, then the MAS may require the applicant to procure a letter from his parent company, right? So this is something which is new, right? So that there's this letter of responsibility in addition to the other requirements. And as I said earlier, you look at the page there, 8.8, amended on 28 January 2020, right? Okay, so that covers the application for a financial advisor's license. Right? It's a very short guideline. I just repeat that it gives you more details as to what must go into the application. Okay. Now look at paragraph 3 of this chapter 9. Now here, this is an important guideline. This is the guideline on fit and proper criteria under guideline number FSG GO1. Okay. All right. Now this guideline sets out the fit and proper criteria applicable to all relevant persons in relation to the carrying out of any activity regulated by the MAS under any written law. All right, now this is very broad. All right, we are not referring only to the Financial Advisors Act. All right, this particular guideline FSG, all right, FSG sets out the fit and proper criteria applicable to all relevant persons in relation to the carrying of any activity regulated by the MAS under any written law. So this is broad, all right? This is broad. The MAS expects a relevant person to be competent, honest, to have integrity, and to be of sound financial standing. All right? Now that is an expectation, all right? This provides the MAS with assurance that the relevant person, all right, whether it is the applicant or whether it's a financial advisor representative or an agent or any person carrying out any activity regulated by the MAS, all right. So it provides the MAS with the assurance that the relevant person is willing and able to fulfill its, meaning a company or his or her obligations under any written law. All right. This also underpins the requirements that the relevant person performs the activities regulated under the MAS or under the relevant legislation efficiently, honestly, fairly, and acts in the best interest of its or his shareholders and customers. Right? So here we are referring to all the stakeholders, right? Stakeholders and customers. A customer is essentially a stakeholder, all right? In other words, if this company deals with any natural person, right? whether it is a financial advisor representative, whether it's a manager, whether it's a cleaner or any employee or whatever, right? Therefore, then it must act honestly, fairly, right, to such persons. Now, we will come to another guideline later in terms of the fair dealing outcomes. It is similar to this particular guideline in terms of fit and proper criteria. Now, key point to remember is that paragraph 3, the onus is on each relevant person to establish that it or he or she is a fit and proper person, rather than for the MAS to show otherwise. Meaning to say, the MAS actually say, hey, look, you must demonstrate to me that you are a fit and proper person. All right, and not for me to tell you whether you are fit and proper. Right? So the onus is on that relevant person. Right? Then the second sentence there reads, where a relevant person is required under the relevant legislation to ensure that another relevant person is fit and proper, then the onus of responsibility, the onus is on the former to establish to the satisfaction of the MAS that the latter is fit and proper. All right. So therefore, there is this requirement, right, in terms of one person to ensure another person that is fit and proper, and it must be demonstrated and established to the satisfaction of the MAS. Right. This is because different appointments and designations entail different responsibilities. All right. So the guidelines apply in a manner to the extent that is suitable in the circumstances. The MAS will consider the nature of the responsibilities of the relevant person in determining the relative emphasis and standard that should be expected of the relevant person. Right? So this is pretty open, but the onus still lies with the relevant person, right, to establish that it or he or she is a fit and proper person. Well, of course, the MAS will look at certain criteria, certain tests, as it were, to determine whether a person is of good standing, right? A person is of good standing in the profession, all right, in respect of the provision of financial advisory services or the distribution and sale of the designated investment products under the Financial Advisors Act, right? So in terms of application, at the time of application, right? So if the MAS finds that the applicant or the persons acting for the applicant, the two persons, right, they do not satisfy the MAS,